Hello again, Ian Stokey with Mastermind Games, back for more Monsterpocalypse, and this time the Planet Eater's monster Rogzor. Wasteland soil? Yeah, I think so. This is the Army Painter one, and needs to be shaken up quite a bit. So, again, one of the Planet Eaters, and Rogzor is blast-oriented, with energy projection veins coming out of his club appendages, and secondary vision organs on the head according to the card. One of his most interesting abilities in alpha form. Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but when he destroys a building, and this is on his blast attack, then units with defense equal to or less than the number of strikes rolled for that attack also take damage. And when he blows up a building, he can clear a room. It's on the hit, because on a hit it's destroyed. Had a long day, took a long walk, and almost got hit by a car because of some brain-dead moron running the crosswalk when I had the signal in my favor, just because she didn't want to wait 2 damn seconds. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated incident. I'm quite frankly getting sick and tired of almost getting run over every time I try to go out on a walk to improve my health. Now, and of course, the turn was normally a very calming, relaxing experience into me coming home as a total nervous wreck. So, in the first edition, every monster had at least 2 different hyper forms, which were represented by different figures. It was a blind purchase collectible game at that point. Their most basic was the Ultra type hyperform, which they were packed with. Their second Mega hyperform could be obtained through organized play and other special events. And Rogzor's Mega hyperform was pretty amazing when it came out. Now, that's not a thing anymore. Each monster just has the one hyperform now, but just an interesting notation from what was. Dark Elf Skin 09164, I'm going to do with this while this is still wet to kind of see if I can blend it a bit. And some of this stuff is just really fighting me. You get that on the pec and that little bit on the underbelly right there. So the Dark Elf Skin can go in and around these veins. I'm going to do the lighting effects in red, and I think those will show up better over on this darker skin color, so I'll do this. So it's implied just by the design that these veins just fold up like this and only pop out when Rogzor is taking a shot. It was also made of a more rubbery feeling resin. It was a little easier to clean on some parts, but I might have taken too much off of the vein itself. It'll still look okay, but yeah, so just kind of be mindful of that. I don't know if it's ever said exactly where each Planet Eater showed up on Earth, outside of Gorgadra, who was in Chicago. One Planet Eater landed in Japan and was killed by the Shadow Sun Syndicate while it was still dormant, so that could be assumed to be an unnamed one at this point. could also lead to something interesting with the Metamorph the faction used to have, Vorgax, which consisted of 4 smaller Planet Eater creatures that combined into a bigger one, and which kind of implied that, at least in the first edition, the Planet Eaters sort of merged with their smaller kin to become bigger monsters. But we'll just see what happens. Their other missing monster, what is it? I'm trying to think. Zorog. Zazor from Series 2 is available. From the original second series is available. Zorog was the other monster from that series, and he had the same body and head actually as Rogzor here does, though in his case possessing a couple big crab claws, and primarily being a buffing type of beast. So I suspect, I'm again going off the assumption that they will release all of the original monsters eventually. So I suspect Zorog will have the most changes to his design, just because of that borrowing of elements in his previous incarnation, and it kind of looks, to a certain extent, like Rogzor's flesh is kind of molten. I didn't really pick that up on Gorgadra when I painted him way back, but kind of do the legs last. But I do want to go around the belly area for blending while it's still wet. And this is definitely an option. Blending, well, painting the whole thing while still wet will let the colors blend together a little better, but you'll have less defined areas. So I want to do that on the flesh, but the hard plates I'll pick out after this is all dried up. Let's go down and get the bicep and go right into the clubbing appendage here. If you hear that racket, there is a pretty bad windstorm coming up. It was pretty bad while I was walking, but it was also nice and sunny, but now it's gotten substantially more intense. So, yeah, that little piece is going to be done in another color, so I'm not going to worry about it. And Hyperform. Rogzor's offense goes up quite a bit, giving him beat back. Which lets him push a monster hit up to 2 spaces in a straight line, causing it to collide with buildings and hazards, which is always nice. Which he actually shares with Guard's monsters, Defender X. Make sure I get a nice solid coat on the skin there. I'll definitely pick out the teeth in another color later, but for now, this is kind of an awkward grip, but I think I can work with it while I get the feet. Kind of top-heavy looking with stubby little legs, but I get the job done, and Rogzor is not a brawler. In fact, his brawl and power stats are kind of lacking. But his blast stat definitely is not which is exactly what he needs because he's a walking artillery platform. Doing just a nominal little bit on the base. Let's we'll hand. We'll just let that just dilute that. Because while I want the two skin colors to blend a bit, I don't want them to one to completely envelop the other, or what's the word I'm looking for? Envelop it substantially enough that it takes over. Okay, I think that's got it, so I'm going to let that dry completely and then hit the last space coat. So back in a bit. Okay. Alright, next. Antique Gold 09050. Again, I'm using just enough water to thin the paint, keeping my brush moist but not overly wet. I'm going to start with the head here. And I am going to get his teeth in the gold. Gorgadra's teeth seem to be built into his jaw a little more. Or rather, this sort of armor is going right up to his gum line on Gorgadra, but it's not that case with Rogzor. Carefully going across this sort of armored strip down the chest. Keeping the brush again moist but not overly wet. Using short, controlled strokes. Let's do the shoulders next. So in current Planet Eaters lore, the same crystals that formed the Harbinger Comet also seem to be prevalent in the brains of the Planet Eaters, seemingly both the monsters and the units. And that seems to be the only commonality, making it seem like the Planet Eaters assimilate certain species from the planets they have devoured into their own genome, and that it may actually be the crystals in charge. These crystals are an incredible source of energy, but when exposed to the energy emitted by the larger creatures, the monsters, they explode violently, causing Earth science, which has prompted Earth scientists to predict that once the Planet Eaters are done eating what they want, they will detonate the crystals to scatter themselves into space again, likely destroying Earth completely in the process. Which is something of a change, as it puts a more final tone to them. In the first edition, they simply were eating everything in sight. So much time has passed between first and second edition with so many changes that some retconning is to be expected, and there's quite a bit in this case. In this case, though, I don't seem to mind because there wasn't a what's the word I'm looking for? There was a significant gap. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. I'm going to do this elbow plate as armor. So we're talking like almost, let's see, about 10 years, I think. No, not quite that much, but several years between the time first edition was just put on indefinite hiatus and the time second edition was even announced, so... Which this, so I suppose the retconning bothers me less because of that gap, whereas opposed to Malifaux, the retconning does bother me a little bit just because they seem to be putting more of a focus on the story behind the game than the game itself, and if you're going to do that, make sure you got the story straight first. Some continuity inconsistencies, especially on larger, longer-running franchises, are to be expected. So, and the second edition of Monsterpocalypse is definitely more of a do-over than anything else. So, getting a little more paint to finish the other arm, the toes, and the tip of the tail. And somehow that got on me in a weird way. Whatever, it's okay. Oh, and somehow along the way I dropped 765 frames. Because that's responded to with an assortment of obscenities. If I could say for certain these glitches were because of something I was doing, I'd be able to fix it, but I don't think they are. Because there's no consistency to it. Sometimes I get through one of these with only one frame dropped. Others, it's hundreds in the blink of an eye. I think I've just got an unreliable program, but yeah, we'll just roll with things. Okay, yep, I got the back of that. Again, I'm wanting my brush moist but not overly wet. And I'm gripping wherever I can get a grip. Just about there. Okay. So, well, I'm really hoping all the monsters from first edition make it into the second. I don't care as much about the units, because they've already seemed to have retconned some of those out. Guard, for example, had 2 additional tanks based off the G tank, an anti-aircraft tank and a ion cannon tank, which seem to have been replaced by other models with their exosuit, and that big anti-monster tank being completely new to this edition. I'm going to have to touch up the flesh right there, so I'll do that off camera. Now let's see here on the heel, based on, okay, I'm thinking that but Planet Eaters have had more of their original units in so far. Belchers, Crawlers, Shraptomite, Explodo, Hawk, Chompers. So, but they've also got some ones that are new to this edition too. So we'll just see how things go with that. Okay, I somehow missed a big chunk on this foot too, so I'll have to take care of that as well. And I'm just nominally getting the toes on the underside. It's going to be covered up by the base anyway once I glue it down, but I suppose just for the sake of being thorough. I might pick out these circular regions as a lighting effect. I haven't decided yet. Alright, I think that's got that. I'll touch up the flesh, and then I can move on to the shading. Alright, time to shade. Ancient Bronze 09049. And I am thinning this into a wash with 1 part water to 1 part paint. Yeah, just going over the gold. Keeping the brush nice and wet during this step. I'm going to try doing the flesh tones together and see if I can blend them the way I want. We'll just see if it works out in reality the same way it works out in my head. But right now I am just going for the gold. Making sure I get in all those slots in the shoulders. To me, look like they could be some sort of exhaust system or possibly biological rocket boost, but if a little bit of this gets onto the skin tone, I'm not going to be too concerned. It'll come out easily enough when I do the shades on the much darker flesh here. But still, I'm going to try to avoid it if I can. Not going to be so easy on the arms with the energy projection veins, but we'll see how it goes. I think that one turned out reasonably well. There hasn't been much Monsterpocalypse fiction in general, just a bit here and there on Privateer Press's website, and much of it is simply in the bios and descriptions on the backs of the packages that the monsters come with, monsters especially, but yeah. Okay. That's where it's going to get a little trickier. I think I'll try doing the claws first. And I will just at least do a nominal amount on the bottom, just for the sake of being thorough, I suppose, but it's not going to be too necessary since that's going to be hidden from view for the most part by being underneath the, or being attached to the base. Trying to get a little scrambled, I suppose. Adjust my grip and grab him from the front, kind of by the thighs. and get the tip of the tail. Alright. Gonna let that dry and move on when it does. Okay. Next shade, Dark Elf Shadow 09163. We'll see if this works out the way I would like. First I need to clear the nozzle. Just paste clip down the hole. Here we are. This could get a little tricky, to be honest, so we'll just see what happens. Thin it out. I'm going to start with the flesh around the club arms. I'm going to just dab it in and let the paint flow where it wants to go. That's not working as well as I would like, so alright, this will come out nicely enough when I highlight. Alright. Again, keeping the brush nice and wet during all of this. Okay. Move on to the face, or attempt to at any rate. Being careful around the gold. Try to finish up the arms. Go around the chest a little on that side. Again, keeping the brush wet. Got under the blot that out. You know what? I think there's a way to do what I want to do here with the shading, so we'll just see if I can pull it off. It's going to be very tricky no matter how I do it, so it's going to be funky. I may as well go for broke and try the blended shading I wanted to experiment with here. So awkward grips all around. I'm kind of gripping by the pointy bits here. Something's dripping paint, that's okay. Okay. Let's see. Next, Grimoire purple. We'll just see if I can get this to blend in the way I would like it to. Thin that out. This is going to be super awkward, especially for the cameras. So doing wet on wet here and letting it just kind of flow in and mix where it wants to. We'll see what I end up with. And even I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but it is an experiment. Let's try to get the light on him a little more. Okay, well, that's got it going. We'll just see what it looks like when it dries. So let that happen, and then when it's dry, I can prep lighting effects. Okay, shading's dry. Turned out reasonably well. It didn't quite blend as much as I was hoping it would, but it works. Matte white. I'm gonna prep the lighting effects now. There's my detailed brush in all of this. Carefully picking out the eyes. Thin it out a little bit more, not quite a wash, but secondary vision organs. I want to get the entire little channel there. These slots on the shoulders. And I think I am going to go ahead and pick these out on the back after all. Wasn't originally going to, but they look the part, I think. If it spills over a little, that's okay. It'll help sell the illusion that it's glowing. And then these 4 little orbs, for some reason, I feel like they should be lit up, so I'm going to do that too. And then here, every single one of these little openings on the what is energy projection fin. We've already talked about how the Planet Eaters have this crystalline component to their physiology, with possibly them absorbing organisms from the planets they've destroyed previously into their own genome. But with that being currently in the fiction, as well as some artwork in the first edition of an injured Planet Eater, I think it was Zazor, a piece of artwork of Zazor versus Nova ESR, both of which are in the game. I have to wonder if they start out as something as a bioweapon, possibly something biomechanical. But that's just speculation. Okay, that's got all the prep work done. Maybe let that dry completely, then I can actually fill in the light. So back in a little bit. Alright, this is dry enough. I can finish up with the lighting. Ruby Red 09101. This is a dark metallic red. Which, after double checking Gorgadra, is what I used on him. Thinning with 2 to 3 parts paint to 1 part water. 2 to 3 parts water to 1 part paint. Oh boy, this is how my day is going. Made it super thin. The overall trick with a lighting effect is for some of the light to show through, so carefully get it in the eyes. And it gets it about right in the secondary vision organ. Just because it highlighted it on the card specifically. That's why I'm saying it out loud. Keeping the brush, just like with the shading, keeping the brush nice and wet during all of this. On the official color scheme, the lighting on the Planet Eaters is green. Well, that was also the case in the original blind purchase collectible version of the game. Their ultra type hyper forms were also translucent bright red, which was also the coloration for the crystals of the Harbinger Comet shards. So I've chosen to kind of do this in this red to kind of tie them both together, both the crystals, the Planet Eaters, and as an homage to what came before in the original game. A little more on that one. And now the little divots in the energy projection veins. It doesn't look like it's completely dry in some of these, but I can work with that. I'll be alright. I'll be fine. Alright, that's got the lighting. Once this completely dries, I can go on and highlight and wrap this up just about there. Alright, last bit of painting, gonna highlight now. Orc blood. This is an army painter color. Ragged feathered brush. Let's see here, this ought to do. Something like that. Oh, frames. No water, straight paint only. Gonna rub most of it out on the paper towel here, so it looks like there's next to nothing left. And lightly dust the area to be affected. So the Army Painter colors do not have numbers like the Reaper Master Series does, or I think they're called Reaper Core colors now. I think they changed their name, but one handy thing about the Reaper paints is once you figure your base coat, you can generally go one number lower to get your shade and one number higher to get your highlight. Usually. You can still get some interesting effects by playing around with those too, so. Okay. Now, Dark Elf Highlight 09165. About this should work. Gonna start with the face, work my way down. You see that seam between the hip here? This is another model where it was incredibly difficult to get cleaned and prepped. And again, that's kind of an artifice of the resin and how it's made. Because outside of one of the biggest difficulties in cleaning these is you can actually go too far and thoroughly mangle the model in the process, because in some cases it's a bit ambiguous as to where certain details end and others begin. towel somewhere. I didn't want it, so just still work with it though. Well, I think that's got it. Oh boy, I'm dropping a bunch of frames right now. Let's just give us a second to stabilize. Excuse me. Cool here? No, apparently not. Alright. It's gonna fight me this much. I'm just gonna have to stop here and see if I can do a little troubleshooting. Oh boy. Okay. The joys of technical difficulties strike again. New gold 09051. Tell you, the more technology advances, the more and more it's becoming like that Mel Brooks movie Spaceballs. Find a good brush. Here's one. My focus is on the most readily visible surfaces. Just kind of burnishing the talons on the feet here. Go ahead and get the tail, get the underside a bit more than I normally would. Going against the edges will help catch the paint better. A little more straight paint where some of that dark elf flesh got on there. It's a little trickier to see if it get in the teeth. Really want to put a lot of focus on this horn here. On around the chest. Getting a little more paint. Almost done. Get those elbows first. make sure I get a little extra on that tip where it seems I not only smudged the paint but managed to get a thumbprint in it. I have to be careful about that going forward. And just burnishing these clubbing appendages, refreshing the paint as needed. The left, which has opened up, is going to be a little tricky. I need a little more paint. I'm hearing bad sounds again, but nothing's happened so far. Yep. Now, okay, that was weird. In most of the official photos I've seen, it looks like the photos have actually been reversed, where the right is open and the left is closed. But the actual physical model has the veins on the left open and the veins on the right closed. And the arms only go on one way, so okay, that's got it. That's all the painting on Rogzor. Now, I need to let that dry completely, and I can glue him onto his base. Okay, time to wrap up. I like to keep the bases for Monsterpocalypse in the protective wrapping until the last minute, because when I get a paint in, the paint goes a-flying. And thick cyanoacrylate superglue. Dot on the bottom of each foot. It's hopefully enough without being too much. Just kind of set them on the base the way I like. It's pretty good. And I need to let that hold that down for about 20 seconds. So. Alright, that did not quite take. That was going to fight me a little bit. Alright, this is just going to fight me a bit, so I'm just going to have to do this. This is going to take a while off camera. The last step will be to varnish it once that's all set, but there's Rogzor from the Planet Eaters faction of Monsterpocalypse. This is the last Monsterpocalypse model I'll be doing for the foreseeable future. We'll just see how things go in the next couple of weeks and months for getting more, but next time, something Warhammer 40,000 related. Until then, I am Ian Stuckey with Mastermind Games, signing out.